And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone delightfully in between. We are doctors, not doctors.
Yeah, that's right. We are
Yeah?
doctors, not doctors. This time we're teledoctors, not doctors.
That's true. We are practicing telemedicine without a license. Also, not actually practicing telemedicine at all. Once again, we cannot stress this enough. Not medical doctors.
Yeah, we're not those kind of doctors.
Yeah, no. Mm-mm,
Yeah,
mm-mm.
this
Yeah,
week, Dr. Armshaw is feeling a bit under the weather.
a little bit.
So,
I've got
yes,
tea.
he's got his tea here.
Yep.
So we are using Zoom and we are going to chat along to our ninth episode, testing all
Yeah,
the different forms of microphones. That
exactly.
after this, I'm going to talk to you about microphone choices because it's time for us to. I
You
was
think?
also speaking to people today about the different kinds of microphones we could use, but again, that's not a conversation
You're
for
right. That's a back of the house conversation. We don't want to have this in front of the guests, in front of
No,
the
we don't.
audience.
No, we don't.
Yeah,
That's just amateur hour.
exactly.
Um,
And we are nothing if not professionals.
we are nothing if not professionals, highly
Yep.
trained and educated professionals who never make any mistakes and
No,
are constantly
no,
perfect.
exactly. And speaking
Just
of our constant perfection, Chris,
yes.
we have got some interesting stuff to talk about this week.
Yeah, as I was going to say, we are constantly perfect, just like
Hmm.
the U.S. president and the Secretary of Defense and
Yep.
all of those people in between.
Everyone running the national security state of the federal government. Yeah, they're 100% always on it, always on time, paying attention, making sure, Chris, that everyone has access to the information that they want to know, whether they have a legal right to that information or not.
Yeah, they're I was very surprised at how transparent they are.
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, transparency really is the word of the day, I think, when it comes
transparency when
to
it comes to
Secretary
national
Hegseth.
security.
Indeed.
National
Indeed.
security.
Yeah.
So we're beating around the bush here as per usual. There's been another wild week of utter chaos, and we say this kind of off camera, off
Hmm.
record, but it is surprising how chaotic every week has been since Trump took office.
I mean, you say surprising, Chris, but I will point out that we've been through this before. From 2017 to 2020, 2020,
2021.
yeah, we had a similar situation where every single week took at least 3 years, where some new crazy thing would happen consistently. It was within, I think, 2 weeks of Trump taking office the first time that his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, had to be fired for, being a Turkish plant, being,
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember that. Yeah,
being an
that's
agent for the
right.
Turkish Republic. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. However, I feel like it wasn't. I didn't feel like every single week was, so butt clenching as the current situation. I mean, I feel like back in 2017, 2018, because we had Brexit over here as well,
Hmm.
and I was like, neck deep in that in the Commons, and it was just craziness over here, craziness over there.
Yep.
But this time, it feels so much worse. It
I
feels,
think I think that's because it is.
yeah,
Um, this is a situation where it's not just that there's incredible incompetence being shown on the regular. It's also incredible incompetence tied to, threats to use military force to seize Greenland,
oh,
which is
invade
fun.
Canada and
Yeah,
invade Canada.
yeah, right. Because I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't, Chris? Just every once in a while, invade your neighbors' homes to take their stuff and kill them. Like that's just a normal part of growing up,
Oh,
where I come from
that's
in
how things
Florida.
work
So
in
yeah.
Florida. Yeah, well, you'd have to in Florida because frankly, you've got only a few neighbors, and it's Alabama, Georgia, and I think Mississippi.
Well, that's the
So,
thing. And I mean,
you,
and the only reason why you haven't seen that kind of like open warfare in the States is what are we going to take from Alabama? Like,
we
seriously, you know?
yeah, we already had that kind of
Yeah.
open warfare a while back.
Yeah.
I thought that the good guys had won that, but oh, that was
And
dumb
to
on
be
my
fair,
part.
Chris, we thought the good guys had won World War II as well. But, I guess time makes fools of us all.
Yes. So let's get
Yeah.
back to the subject at hand. So, for those of you who've been underneath a rock or choose not to listen to the news and for some reason listen to this instead,
We're
the
not here to judge.
we're not okay. Patrick's not here to judge. Um, so the Atlantic, which is a serious, very serious magazine in
Hmm.
America that covers political issues, uh, had a story that I think broke on Sunday night UK time.
Hmm.
And the story was effectively I was added to a top secret war chat. That's not exactly what it was called, but that's effectively what the guy was said. And the person
Yeah.
who wrote the article was the editor in chief of the Atlantic,
Yep.
Jeffrey Goldblum.
Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey
Gold
Goldberg.
Goldberg. That's right.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Goldberg, not
And the thing
Goldblum.
is, if you are no, not Jeff Goldblum. Although if we're making the movie, obviously we're casting Jeff Goldblum.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
right?
Ooh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. So aside from Mr. Goldblum and his undeniable star appeal, Jeffrey Goldberg is a well-regarded national security reporter. He's someone who has been really quite well known in national security circles, quite well known in journalistic circles. He's a bit of a macher, is what I'm saying. Like he's one of the people that has connections. He is well regarded in the national security sphere, to my understanding, and also is not someone that you could credibly characterize as being a raving leftist.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, you would place him basically like pretty firmly in the pro-military, pro-national security state wing of possibly the Democratic Party. Like I'm actually not certain of his partisan politics, but generally speaking, he's understood to be, someone who uh, pro-Israel was too comfortable with the case for the Iraq War for a lot of people who are very much against the war when it happens. So this is not someone who's like, he doesn't write for Jacobins.
Yeah, no, this is a very serious person, and there are a lot of people on the right who would have no issue with him as well. And
Mm,
so when he posted this story online and basically said that I was added to a top secret war chat that included the Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, the
hmm.
National Security Advisor. Who else am I missing?
Oh Lord. I mean, basically, oh, the vice president. Can't forget the vice president,
I
of
said the
course.
Vice President.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Stephen Miller. Did you mention Stephen
and
Miller?
and yes, and
Uh,
and Stephen Miller and about 20 other people
yep.
who were all basically in a chat that was called effectively Houthi attack plans. And the concept behind the ch signal chat was that um, Hesketh and a bunch of other
Mhm.
people wanted to basically make a lot of people aware of what was happening in an American attack on Houthi targets in Yemen. And
Yep.
for background there, Yemen's currently in a civil war,
Mhm.
and half the country, not, well, a portion of the country is under the control of kind of the traditional government, and a portion of the country, I think a larger portion of the country is under the control of Houthi rebels. And Houthi
Mm.
rebels are very anti-American, very anti-Israel, very anti, well, they're and they're effectively a terrorist organization.
Well, yeah,
And
but not only that, they're also very much being supported by the Iranian regime.
yes,
So there's and this is one of the reasons why the civil war in Yemen has been so brutal. In a sense, we can almost see it as being a little bit of like a proxy war between the Saudi governments and the Iranian governments.
yeah,
Each of them backing a different side, basically. Um, but they've been in the news recently, Chris, after the October 7th attack in 2023 in Israel, because since then, of course, the Israeli government has engaged in massive retaliation that has killed, I believe, over 2% of the pre-war population of Gaza, which is,
yeah,
that's about the percentage of Americans that died in the American Civil War, the war that killed the most Americans of all.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
So
that's
that
that's quite a thing.
they took their time to I'm sorry, they've aligned themselves with that conflict and they slowed
Hmm.
down and attacked international shipping in
Yeah.
the area. And basically Europe and the rest of the world had to deal with that. And they had to protect the ships.
Well, that's the thing. It is a legitimate threat to freedom of the seas, thanks to the geographic location. For those of you who are not currently looking at a map and haven't really had a reason to until relatively recently, um, The Suez Canal links, of course, the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean. It is one of the biggest trade routes in the world. A huge amount of shipping goes through it. If you remember the Evergreen, that massive cargo ship that blocked the Gulf of, or that blocked the Suez Canal a few years back and caused, inflation all over the place, and it was kind of a big deal. This is that. This is that sort of shipping route.
Yeah.
Yemen is at the southern part of the Red Sea. It is another choke point effectively between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. So having the Houthis firing off anti-ship missiles and attacking international shipping, that is another big problem basically for that trade route.
Yeah, so the European governments and American governments over the past 18 months have
Hmm.
been fighting them, or frankly dropping bombs on them.
Yep.
And let's not forget that the Houthis, I believe they took over a cargo ship. I think it was last year, landed on
Mm.
the cargo ship with a helicopter and took over control of the ship. And I don't know what's actually happened with that in the instance. So that's some
Yep.
background to why America was attacking or targeting these people.
Yep.
So this the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic was added to this conversation. Inside the conversation, there were timings of bombings there,
Yep.
and also the personal thoughts of the Vice President of the United States, the National Security Advisor,
Hmm.
the Secretary of State, I'm sorry, the Secretary of Defense, regarding their opinions on that and many other things, including Europe. And
Hmm.
the problem, in case you haven't figured this all out, is that there shouldn't have been a person in on this chat who was not authorized to read this. And now we have to clarify that Jeffrey Goldberg did not try to
Hmm.
find this. He was
Yep.
added by
Yep.
himself.
Yep. And Jeffrey Goldberg, being someone who, again, has a very long history of having contacts in the national security area and whatnot, according to him, his original thought had been, oh, good, Mike Waltz wants to talk to me. This is great because I am a reporter and he presumably is a source that has been used before. After all, if Mike Waltz is going to add Jeffrey Goldberg onto this signal team, right?
Yeah,
That means that Jeffrey Goldberg's information had to already be in Mike Waltz's phone.
yeah,
Like he already had his contact information and put him in presumably by accident. But this really I do not believe for a second that this is their first rodeo, that this is the first time that Jeffrey Goldberg would have spoken to Mike Waltz. I would not doubt if Mike Waltz basically was acting as a source for Jeffrey Goldberg in prior years.
yeah.
Um,
It it does lend itself to like clearly somebody like Mike Waltz is leaking to Jeffrey Goldberg, giving him either positive
mhm,
or negative opinions on what was happening
right.
with the administration.
And, there's no reason to suspect that that would have meant that, he would have been, Mike Waltz would have necessarily been acting in a way that the Trump administration would not have approved of. But it certainly does suggest that, well, if they didn't know about it before, they're probably going to have some questions for Mr. Waltz going forward.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah.
S- So so um so here we are now, Jeffrey Goldberg, and we should also do one last bit.
Mhm.
Apparently he thought this was a hoax. He didn't think that this was real. He didn't think that somebody would be copying him into something as sensitive as this. And once he realized what had happened, he pulled
Mhm.
himself out of it. And I don't know what else he did to protect himself, but he basically
Well,
said, "Oh, whoopsie, whoopsie. I'm not supposed to be reading this."
Well, no, actually. And the thing is, from a legal standpoint, he has absolutely not committed any crime. He's done nothing at all disreputable here. What he did was he gained information through the incredible negligence of others. He did not then spread any of the classified information that he heard. When he wrote his story, he was very clear that he was invited in. The story was that he was present for this in what should have been incredibly classified meeting,
Yeah,
subject to the most stringent of operational security, Chris.
yeah,
And then not sort of saying what explicitly was said. And that ended up being, well, that led to, I think, Pete Hegseth in particular making a terrible mistake. Because after the story came out, and to be fair, Mr. Goldberg did contact the White House afterwards to say, "Hey, so this happened. I am absolutely publishing a story on this. Would you like to comment?" And the White House had no comments to give, Chris.
Yeah, they didn't have a comment to
Yeah.
give. I believe they validated the fact that that was all real, right?
Oh, it is all real. It's
Yeah.
absolutely all real. This and we'll be getting to the intelligence hearings a little bit later when it was absolutely admitted that yes, this conversation did happen, which is funny because Pete Hegseth, when he's first asked about this after the story is published, his response is to say basically that Mr. Goldberg is a left-wing radical and a scumbag who makes up everything and engages in hoaxes, and it's all lies. All of it is lies, lies, lies. At which point Jeffrey Goldberg then publishes the texts themselves.
Yeah, he publishes the detailed text. Now, we'll get to that in a second, but the important thing on the other side of this is that uh, all of this is confidential information that should not have been shared on a Signal, and Signal is like one
Ah,
step above like WhatsApp.
yeah, yeah.
It's an encrypted messaging system, but frankly, you know, your phone calls on, let's say, Google Duo or
Hmm.
on Zoom or
Yep.
whatever, they're all encrypted as well. But they like that's encrypted from like, you know, some hacker trying to find what you're doing, not some state actor who has
Yeah.
huge resources trying
Yeah.
to get at you. So this is the problem with this is the crux of the problem that we're talking about here is that both national security information is being discussed on
Hmm.
effectively a free, I don't know if it's free, but on a
It's a
civilian
third
platform.
it's a third party platform.
Yeah.
Like, let's say for a moment that, in an alternate universe, the people who own and operate Signal are not good actors with the best interest of the United States at heart. And maybe they decide that they want to, violate the encryption on that. I mean, the thing is, you'd have to have such an incredible level of trust
Yeah.
in the operators of this app to even begin to think that this would be even a vaguely appropriate thing to do. And of course, it's absolutely not. And even if you could say that, well, Signal is absolutely impregnable, nothing could get past their encryption. It is watertight, airtight, bit tight, whatever. People's phones are not. And that's an
No,
issue
exactly. And that's
because if
another
you
issue.
because as Der Spiegel reported recently,
Yep.
the cell phone numbers, email addresses, and some passwords of I think Mr. Hegseth, the National Security Administration Chairwoman, Tulsi Gabbard, and a few other people they're available online. You can buy them. You can buy them
Yeah.
right now. And speaking of which, a word from our sponsors. No, okay, we do not take them
No,
as sponsors.
we're
They are
not there
not.
yet. We're
No,
not.
absolutely not.
But yes, that's part of that's a massive part of the problem is
Yeah.
that these people are using effectively third-party platforms. They're using the same stuff you and I use to try to get
Coordinate
around
the
them.
bombing of Yemen.
And as far as we know, just this, because this is all we know about for now. This is, you know, we
Yeah.
accidentally got told about this. Who knows? It also coordinating through Signal.
Well,
Uh,
and this is the thing. No one in the chat logs appears to have said, "Hey guys, this is weird. Why are we meeting on Signal?" No one appears to have said, "Hey guys, is this the kind of thing that we should be discussing on Signal?" Which makes me suspect that this is in no way the first time they have used Signal for incredibly high-level confidential information. So this is really a situation where I think going forward, we have to take it as a given. We have to presume, until proven otherwise, that the Russians know everything,
well,
that
I think we have to.
everyone knows everything in the information sphere now.
Well, hang on. I think we need to specify that as well because another part of this story is that the national security advisor, when this whole thing was going on, was in Russia, giving up more stuff to Vladimir Putin. You know, as America gives away more of
Yep.
Ukraine to Putin. So
Yeah.
when all of these texts are going through with all this classified information about where this stuff was going to happen, where these bombs are going to drop, the the phone that was being texted was the personal phone of Mike Waltz.
Yep.
And if that phone was in Russia and he was using
Hmm.
that phone, if he was using that phone, then Russia could easily hack into his phone to get that information out. And people and this is a well-known thing in a lot of countries. So this isn't from personal experience, obviously, but I've heard stories
Hmm.
online of people saying, you know, I got off plane in country X, and before I left, they said, "Okay, here's your phone. Like, don't take your personal phone with you. Here's a phone that we're giving you. When you turn your phone on, when you get off the airplane in country X, take a look
Hmm.
at the battery bar. It's going to go
Hmm.
from full charge to half charge in a second, and that's because your phone was just hacked by the country
Oh
that you
wow.
just landed it. So it's not like you get a phone call and it's somebody on the other line saying, "Oh, I'm gonna hack your phone." It's just something that happens. Um, and
Yeah.
I've heard these stories time and time again that, do not bring your personal phone with you. Now, Mike Waltz, to be fair, said he didn't bring his personal phone with him, but that
Mm.
doesn't mean that he doesn't use Signal to do national security conversations. And the big like rage point for a lot of like establishment people
Hmm.
is that the United States has spent a lot of money on secure co communications and secure rooms called SCIFs.
Yeah.
And these rooms are specifically designed to prevent people from hacking into your phone or listening in on what you want to do. That's why like personal these kind of very serious discussions and details are not done, sitting in front of the Washington Monument. They're
Right.
done sitting in a room with a bunch of electronics to prevent people from listening in.
Right. Because, it's national security. Um, this is it's really one of the weird signs of the times, Chris, that the most basic things that we've all taken for granted for ages all of a sudden become weirdly negotiable in these moments. So, like, you'll have, for example, I believe it was the New York Times, either the New York Times or the Washington Post, refer to this as like, a relatable screw up, basically.
Yeah,
Because who hasn't accidentally CC'd the whole office when really you were just trying to CC, your friend in the next cubicle? And the
exactly.
answer to that is, well, we've all done that, but none of us have blabbed state secrets over Signal to Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic. That is not a relatable screw up.
And I mean, it sounds relatable, but it's also the sane washing that I believe is definitely going on. And I've
Hmm.
heard some kind of explanation for the sane washing, which is they don't want to get sued by Trump.
Oh
So,
yeah,
so
yeah,
basically, over the election, anyone who doesn't paint Trump in a very, favorable or non-insane light, they'll just get sued and they'll just run away. But
yeah,
and so when you say something like, oh, the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense were using, let's just call it WhatsApp, to
yeah,
decide, how to bomb and where to bomb
yeah,
these targets in another country. Um, it, I feel like a lot of these outlets are like, well, I don't want to get sued, so let's just say it's a bit of a whoopsie, but it's only for them. They are the
yeah,
only ones who are allowed to make that kind of mistake. And so
yeah.
I think we can use this to kind of segue into the intelligence hearings and also into the MAGA crowd, because the timing of these releases was enormous
It
because
was really impressive just how badly this worked out for the White House. Um,
it,
because what was going on? What was going on? What was planned for the day that the story came out, Chris?
the day that the story came out, the director of national intelligence, the director of the FBI, the director of the CIA, and there's a person, I think a general from the Air Force or
Mm.
someone from the Air Force is also there to discuss like imminent threats to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And also, the next day, they were going to the House Select Committee on Intelligence to do the exact same thing. So
Mm.
the day that the story comes out, they have to stand in front of the Senate and basically explain themselves. Now, this is the
Yeah.
problem with with the MAGA folk versus, normal people, is
Mm.
that you knew that the MAGA folk were going to ask questions like, "How was your day? Is your chair comfortable?" And the Democrats were going to ask questions like, "What the hell is going on? Why the hell
Yeah.
did this happen?" And that's almost exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, you say almost. Tell me how, in what way it was not literally that, Chris.
So I'm forgetting the names now, right?
Mm.
I can only remember a few names from all the senators, but let's say the chair of the committee was like, "You did a good
Mm.
job, and let's move on. Let's talk about, terrorists and all that,"
Mm.
right? And he gave Kirsty, no, the
No, not Christy. No, Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi
Tulsi
Gabbard.
Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Hmm.
Got Tulsi Gabbard like an easy time, and the director of the CIA gave him an easy time.
Hmm.
And then he went to like the vice chair of the committee. I think his name is Warner, maybe Mark
Mm.
Warner, Senator
I
Warner.
believe it's Mark Warner. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was like a dog with a bone, and he's just like, what the hell are you doing? How the hell did this happen? And obviously, there is no explanation for this. So, um,
Oh, I beg to differ, Chris. There's a really easy explanation for it. It just makes them all look like idiots.
yeah, oh yeah, there's a very easy explanation for them, but like as far as keeping your job, in a normal world, they would already
Yeah.
have been fired. But
Oh, they'd be fired. A bunch of them would be under criminal investigation, not necessarily being, indicted, but there would have to be an investigation because you have to investigate that.
oh,
Like
this
a
is
huge breach of national security like that, you got to investigate to make sure that there wasn't anything like worse than simple incompetence going
yeah,
on,
a full
you know?
investigation has to happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it should also be noted for those of you paying attension at home, a full investigation is not happening and will not happen. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has already stated there will be no investigation of any of
yeah,
this. And what was it? On Fox News. Oh, what's that? What he's, meathead, kind of like short black hair.
You mean Greg Guttard or
No, not Greg Gutfeld. Different meathead. It's a different meathead. I
you gotta
Jesse something or
oh,
other.
Waters?
Yes, Jesse Waters. There we go.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, so he was very open with his audience and saying Republicans control everything, so of course there'll be no investigations. Except that he thinks that's a good thing.
Oh, in this case, he thinks it's a good thing, and that's the
Yeah,
MAGA world. We'll get into that say, so don't let me forget about that.
you're right. Good point. Good point.
But so Mark Warner, Senator Mark Warner, if that's his name, I know it's Senator Warner. Definitely, he just starts laying into them and says, was there any classified information on there? Gabbard says no. She's like, there was no classified information shared. She kept on repeating that line over and over again, and then
Mm.
he kept on basically saying, if nothing was classified, share all the signal chats. And she was like, I can't do that, and he's like, why? Why can't you share what was in the chats if no classified information was shared? And she's like, well, no classified information. So she was going around in a circle, right?
Because, well, of course, because she was trapped in in a logical vice of her own making because she's not very good at this, Chris, I'm afraid to say.
No, no,
Um,
she,
I did misidentify her earlier because, as we know, we don't make mistakes on this show.
never infallible.
So when I said before that Tulsi Gabbard was NSA chairwoman, what I actually said was that she was the director of national intelligence.
Yeah, DNI.
And so
I
exactly,
think you and
DNI.
I are
So
saying two different things.
well, I don't know. I worry that people listening earlier in the podcast may have thought they heard me say something incredibly wrong and very, very embarrassing for me. But in reality, that didn't happen. And actually, everything I said was perfectly true. Don't believe your ears.
They misremembered what you said.
Exactly. They really did. And it's okay, audience. I forgive you. I'm big like that. Me and Tulsi, we're really good at forgiving the foibles of others in misunderstanding when we have said things that we absolutely said.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
yeah.
That's true. So in this hearing, you had Gabbard basically saying nothing was wrong, the CIA director saying nothing was wrong. And then they went to the next Republican, and this is what I found interesting, is that the
Hmm.
Republican didn't really talk about uh the signal leaks, but
Hmm.
he was talking about the government's like the MAGA government's current shift towards Russia. Now he wasn't overt with it because he's afraid he's going to lose his seat as well, right?
Hmm.
But he was basically saying he's like, okay, based off of what America is doing, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like based off of what America's doing, right?
Hmm.
France and the United Kingdom are planning on sharing nuclear information with Germany.
Hmm.
And he's saying, how do you guys feel about effectively the nuclear proliferation that's about to happen in Europe as a
Yep.
result of this administration's policies? And I'm
Hmm.
like, as a MAGA person goes and Republican, I'm like, that's a very good question. It sure isn't addressing the elephant in the room, but it's addressing the insane policies that are being undertaken by Trump and the MAGA
Yep.
government. And
And I think it is a really important question in and of itself because it's true. All the dreams of non-proliferation, all the attempts to like sort of keep that nuclear genie as much in the bottle as we can, that's all gone now.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to get nukes if they can get nukes. Like that's
Well,
just what's going to happen now
well,
because it's the only way to
yeah,
protect yourself against America. Like
and
I'm
that's
sorry to say it, but like if you don't want America to invade you, get some freaking nukes.
and the
That
fact.
is the clear message.
And that's the problem is that, and so there was no answer to that really, obviously. There were no answers that were going to come out of,
Hmm.
that group of people's mouths. Like Kash Patel was also there. I don't remember if I said that. And Kash Patel was asked by the Democrats,
Did he
oh,
look like he was surprised to have suddenly blinked into existence in a world he neither created nor understands?
yeah, he definitely looked as if he was coming, that if he was still high. Like the guy he just consistently looked as if he's just, I'm gonna be generous and says he's had 16 coffees every day. Um,
I think
so
that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said about Kash Patel, actually, I think.
yeah,
So yeah.
so basically, he was there. He was asked, "Are you going to be launching an investigation?" And he just said something like, "Well, I've only seen this today, and I don't know what's happening yet." And there's a lot of
Mhm.
ignorance in the room, just like with Trump himself, who had never heard about this. He doesn't know what's going on. Same with
Again,
the,
this is 2 days after the White House had been contacted and told about this story.
yeah.
So I mean, what do we believe here, Chris? Do we believe that Donald Trump was told about the story and then completely forgot about it because he is developing dementia, as his father did at about the same age? Do we believe that Donald Trump was told about it and was like, well, I'm going to lie to everybody about this because this looks bad and I don't want the stink to be on me? Or do we believe that no one in the White House told him because he's
I
not really running things?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with number three, that probably nobody told him at first, probably to keep him in the dark, to give him plausible deniability, and also to not have him interfere. Who knows? But
Yeah.
the point being is that, so on that, let's say I think it was Monday or Tuesday. Monday, yeah, they
Hmm.
had a hearing. Let me check because we're on our computers now.
Ah, that's
Uh,
right. Look at this. We have,
oh,
see,
it
and
was
this is why
Tuesday.
we're never going to be wrong again.
Yeah, it
Not
was
that we were ever wrong
Tuesday.
before.
That's right. So on Tuesday they
Exactly.
had the hearing. And then on Wednesday they had a hearing in the House of Representatives. In the interim, the White
Hmm.
House and the MAGA folk had been ripping Jeffrey Goldberg to shreds, saying that he is a disreputable,
Yep.
untrustworthy
Yep.
liar. To which
Yep.
Jeffrey Goldberg uses the magazine that he runs to release the screenshots of what was put up. And what was put up was the timings and locations of
Yep.
bombings.
The
And
types of the targets, the types of weapons that are used. Like I think they even basically included flight plans. Like
yeah,
this is the thing is right. Like yes, it's embarrassing. Blah 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 blah. But here's the real deal. If the Houthis had learned of this, they would have known. Oh, well, the bombs are going to come there. Let's make sure that we have any anti-aircraft capabilities we have ready to, kill the pilots who are coming in. Like this could easily have led to the deaths of American servicemen because that's what battle is.
yeah,
And if you give the enemy a heads up, it's not like, oh, well, that just makes it more fair. It just means that more people on your side are going to die.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so like you don't have to be a humanitarian to think this is a terrible, terrible move from the standpoint of like American greatness and national security.
And even worse than that, right? So it also disproves what Tulsi Gabbard had said the day before, that there was no confidential information shared. So
Hmm.
when she went in front of this house, she had to figure out a way to protect, not even protect herself, to undo the lie that she had told. And I didn't watch the
Hmm.
House hearings, so I don't know
Hmm.
how she if I don't know how she dealt with it. Obviously, it doesn't matter if she get in or out of it, because the final part of this is the
Hmm.
difference in reality between MAGA world and
Yep.
reality. So if you and kind of, this is the point of the entire section, is that if you are part of the MAGA world, right? And I'm not even
Hmm.
saying the entirety of MAGA world, because there is a contingent who's sitting there like, well, let's just own up to this and move on.
That's true. And there are some Republican, well, there's Chuck Hagel, a
Chuck
Republican
Hagel.
senator. Yeah, his response to this was, let's see, my reaction is amazement, astounding. Is this gross negligence? To which I say, well, yes, Chuck, it literally is gross negligence. Come on. And the thing is, and it's important to say what that means, the idea of gross negligence. Under the Espionage Act, which would be the controlling legislation here, the unauthorized release of classified information can amount to a crime if it's either done intentionally, where you absolutely mean to share this kind of information. For the record, people go to jail for this.
Yeah.
Reality Winner absolutely went to jail for this.
Yeah.
This is a serious thing. Republicans have been very seriously behind the strict application of the Espionage Act
Yes.
in circumstances of intentional release of classified information. But it's also a crime if it happens as the result of gross negligence, which goes beyond simple negligence, goes beyond simply failing to live up to the standard of care that you owed as a duty, and goes towards, oh no, that's just so bad that that's got to be a crime.
Yeah.
And number one, having your conversation on Signal. Number two, doing it while people are just on their cell phone down in Moscow, like you do. Number three, bringing in Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic, for all of this. Number four, sharing incredibly sensitive, confidential national security information in that circumstance. I don't think there's any reasonable jury, any jury in the world that was not utterly corrupted would look at those facts, and they would be very well within their rights to come to the conclusion that that is gross negligence and therefore a crime.
Absolutely.
Like,
And
good
that's
God.
why the Republicans are not going to prosecute themselves. Um, and
And that therein lies the rub, doesn't it?
therein lies the rub.
Yeah, Pam Bondi has said there will be no investigation of this. The White House has been clear; they will not be firing anybody. There will be no accountability for this whatsoever. And as Jesse Waters on Fox News put it, or pointed out, that's because it's Republicans in charge of the government. There will be no accountability.
And to say it so blatantly and so openly, to say, well, you know what, guys, we're allowed to do whatever we want because we're in charge now, and and and
Yeah,
and and still pretend that you are the pro-Constitution, pro-freedom, pro this, that, and the other party, our movement is. It shows what they really are, which is an authoritarian fascist movement that is
yeah,
seeking to, put only make sure that they're the only people that are
yeah.
allowed to have decisions, the only people allowed to have opinions, and the only people who are allowed to mess up.
There is actually a quote. I'm going to look up this quote real quick because I think it really encapsulates something really important.
And while
So,
you, oh, go
oh,
ahead.
okay.
Do
So,
you need time to look it up and for me to fill in the space?
no, 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 it's okay. I've already done it. I've already done it. That's why my voice got a little bit distant there,
Okay,
basically.
good, good.
Um, yeah. And so, according to Quora, and I am going to cite my source here because I'm not certain who said it, but this seems like a reasonable thing. The former president of Peru, from 1933 to
Oh,
1939, a great time in Peruvian politics, as I'm sure every listener of this podcast is aware, had
obviously.
this to say regarding his governing philosophy. For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law.
There it is.
Yeah, and that I think is basically the governing philosophy of the Trump White House. I think we can all see this now. They're pretty open about that, even celebrating it in the case of Jesse Waters on Fox News.
Yeah. So I think we'll leave it there. Who knows what's going to
Yeah.
happen? I don't know how else like an outside person can try to bring this to justice. Maybe a local judge can, or a federal judge can deal with it. I think the Signal case might be going in front of Judge Boasberg.
Yes, actually, because several organizations have requested that this actually is another thing we didn't mention. Why would you use Signal in the first place? Well, because that way you can evade the Governmental Records Act and keep secret from the American people what is being done in their name, so that no one ever knows why things were done or what was done. Which is always the sign, I think, of an open and honest government, Chris.
Yeah,
Because Signal, you see, well, it deletes your messages after about a week.
that's right.
And so they, various organizations immediately sued to request the retention of those records to make sure that they are not destroyed because, that would be destruction of governmental records, which is a crime.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and Boasberg, already having so much on his plate, now has to deal with that as well. Fortunately, it seems to be a very easy ruling because yes, these are clearly governmental records. This is the Vice President of the United States discussing military action against another country, in conjunction with members of the cabinet. This is clearly governmental records. It can't be destroyed legally. So yeah, so it's pretty easy for him to basically put out the injunction saying, yeah, you cannot destroy those records. You have to preserve them.
Yeah, great.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. And something else we've been
Yeah.
keeping an eye on as well, shifting gears, is are the kidnappings of foreign nationals
Uh,
who have the legal right to live in the United States.
what great times we live in, Chris, where this is a continuing story.
A continuing
Uh,
story. So why don't you
yet
update us with,
more. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you. So, um, delightfully, we spoke before about how the United States was starting to detain people with permanent right to reside inside of the United States, those who hold green cards, that is, as well as those on valid visas, arresting them and, threatening to deport them for their purely political speech. We
yeah,
mentioned before that this is not something that the government obviously has the right to do. In fact, it is something that a very strong argument can be made violates the First Amendment. First Amendment privileges regarding the right to freedom of speech. These are not restricted to citizens. It's a restriction on the government.
yeah,
The government does not have the power to punish people for their purely political speech unless it falls into one of the buckets of incitement to commit imminent violence and lawlessness. Not even saying I argue we should overthrow violently the government of the United States. You have the legal right to say that. Weirdly enough,
yeah,
we you don't have the right to do is to say and we should burn down the police station right now because that would be an incitement towards imminent lawlessness and violence, right?
right.
Yeah.
It's almost like saying, you know, we're all going to march
Mhm.
down to the Capitol and you're going to fight to get your country back,
Yeah, we got to fight or we're not going to have a
your
country
country
anymore,
anymore. And
Yeah,
let's all go to
exactly.
the Capitol right now and
You,
let's have a little chat with those people trying to take away your country.
I mean, funnily enough, you could make the argument that that was literally an incitement towards imminent lawlessness. Funny how that works.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
okay. Merrick Garland really saved the day on that one for
Yep. Yep.
Trump.
Yep. Hmm.
But
But
let's not get distracted. Yes, yes,
but yeah, so if we, that's one of the things that you can have a limitation on speech for. You can have a limitation on speech when it comes to slander, when it comes to things of that nature, libel. That is not protected under the First Amendment either, because of course, if you're slandering someone, you're spreading falsehoods about them to destroy their reputation without an honest and reasonable belief in the truth of what you're saying, then obviously this is something that's causing harm to somebody else, and you don't have the right to do that to someone.
yeah,
Um, but there's not a lot of speech that isn't protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment has been found to protect even the most outrageously appalling, vicious, and cruel speech.
yes,
And yet, the people being detained currently, they're not being detained for incitement. They're not being detained for slander or other forms of abuse in that sense. They're being detained for being pro-Palestinian protesters.
right,
And the recent story that's just come out, I think, is a really good example of just what that looks like. Um, Rumeysa Ozturk is a visa holder in the United States. She had done the following. She had co-authored an editorial in her student newspaper
oof,
arguing in favor of the university divesting from Israel, basically. Now,
wow,
yeah.
wow. I'm surprised that
Mhm.
she was allowed to go back to her dorm room and not be
Oh,
immediately locked up.
well, I mean, the thing is, right? If we're taking the law seriously, then she has committed nothing that would in any way justify the taking away of her visa, basically. Um,
Also, sorry, when did she write this?
so this was actually that's a good question. I'm going to find this real quick. Do, 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 do,
So,
do.
yeah. So my question, and the reason I want to find out when she wrote this is because I suspect
Mhm.
that, the government, the American government right now is literally going through what these people have done, or more likely is that the MAGA folks have a hit list of people that they're trying to get at.
Hmm.
And if they can, and we're just going down that list right now. So, Mahmoud Khalil,
Hmm.
like these people weren't front and center. They were part of the management. They weren't front and center.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, did you find it?
March 2024.
March. So that was last year.
That was a year ago. That
Last
was a year
year.
ago. Yeah. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. 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 It seems that well, we should probably tell people what actually happened to her this week, why she is in the news.
Yeah, we've
Um,
clearly missed that part. Yeah.
yeah, so she leaves her building and is immediately swarmed by men dressed all in black, wearing masks, who then grab her phone, grab her backpack, handcuff her, and shove her into a an awaiting vehicle. Um, this is seen. This is recorded by I think someone's like basically like door camera.
Yeah.
So the images are there of her being kidnapped.
Yeah.
Someone views this happening at the time and shouts, "Is this a kidnapping?"
Yeah.
They eventually shout back, "We're the police." However, it's not clear what police they could possibly have been, because police do things like wear uniforms and have badges and have faces that you can see because they are officers of the peace. They are a civilian force whose job it is to enforce the law.
Yeah.
When you've got masked thugs grabbing people off the street and hustling them into cars, this is the sort of thing that, and this is going to sound like I'm being a bit extreme here, but no, this is what you see under Stalinism. This is what you see under, totalitarian regimes. These are the actions of a state that is looking to not just crack down on opinions that it disagrees with, but to make clear to everyone watching what happens if you say something that they disagree with.
Yeah.
It is prima facie evidence that the United States is not a free country.
Yeah. It's moving towards, that I'm probably about 10 steps behind you on this only because
Fair. That's
it's
fair.
it's not basically they're making it very it's like the guy for the dean of the Columbia Journalism School said,
Yeah.
delete everything. If you were a foreigner, delete everything that's negative about America. We can't protect you. They're
Yep.
creating this space where they're going after the immigrants first. And we'll say this every week because it's
Yep.
true. They're going after these people who have the legal right to be here. You have the legal right to say what you want. You have the legal right to say, that
Hmm.
America, that Trump is crap or that, you like Trump. Now, I thought about this the other day. If they have an issue with her political beliefs or her personal beliefs and trying to
Hmm.
protect, trying to project those in a protest or not, it's funny that they didn't have the same issues with one Nigel Farage when, he came over to campaign for Trump. Now, obviously, Nigel Farage came over in the Biden administration,
Hmm.
but he's been back since. And
Yep.
he went back for the inauguration, and he was allowed in, no questions asked. He's allowed to come over. That's how you know that this is a targeted political attack upon an individual who they
Yeah.
think cannot defend themselves. And didn't she get sent to Louisiana as well?
Oh, yeah. Despite a court order saying that in no way could they do that. So once again, a violation of a court order. Once again, a total disregard for the law. Once again, an attempt to use executive power publicly to punish people purely on the basis of their speech. And it should be mentioned that Donald Trump has already started making noises about applying the same sorts of tactics to American citizens.
Yeah,
Uh, in particular, if you've been following this, and I see no reason why you wouldn't, there's been a bit of a movement in America to vandalize Teslas,
yeah,
to vandalize them, call them swastikars, to protest outside of Tesla dealerships. In other words, people using a variety of methods, many of them entirely constitutional and legal. Some of them, I mean, spray painting stuff is not, it's not actually legal. You can't legally deface someone's property.
it's
On the other
graffiti.
hand,
It's graffiti.
suck it the hell up. Like seriously, there's worse things in this world than having to wash your car. I guess I'm being mean. I'm being mean. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean,
I speak tongue in cheek. I guess.
yeah, I guess, but it's also
Um,
it's graffiti versus, kicking down the windows of Congress and stealing a whole bunch of shit and like
Yeah.
breaking into the Senate, right?
You
So
know,
you're
and
talking
threatening to murder the vice president, like you
and
would think.
yeah,
Yeah. So, but so obviously, protesting outside a Tesla dealership, that's just as bad. So Donald Trump recently made an announcement that he's looking forward to the 20-year prison sentences awaiting those who protest against Tesla dealerships because they are terrorists, and maybe they should spend their sentence in El Salvador.
yeah. And as
So,
yeah, as
yeah,
we said, you know, they're starting with with foreign nationals who have the right to be
yep.
here. Well, actually, they started with foreign nationals who did not have a legal right to be here.
Well, those who were
We
applying for
think,
asylum. And for the record, it under international law, treaties to which the United States is a party, and again, it must be said, under the US Constitution, treaties are supreme law.
right,
When the United States binds itself to a treaty, it binds itself to a treaty
that's the law of
that
the
is
land.
law, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, when you're taking people who are in the United States, exercising their right under American law to apply for asylum, and then expelling them without any attempt to determine A, their asylum claims in the first place, B, whether or not they are actually a threat to the United States, C, without ever going before a judge to say any of this. Well, we've already pointed out that they could take anyone and do that to them.
And
Because the thing is, if they don't need to go before a judge, then they can take anybody.
then anybody can be anyone.
Yeah.
And so that's the
And
current state of where we are.
yep.
With the kidnappings, and we can only hope that it doesn't, expand to people who are not, in Trump's favor at the time. And if you're a MAGA person who is hate
Hmm.
listening to this, thinking that you can't be touched, remember, he doesn't need you anymore. You're
Yep.
not, there's no reason to protect you anymore.
Yep.
So, keep your head down and keep your mouth shut and
Yep.
only stand up to praise the leader.
Yeah.
Um,
You are free to do exactly what Donald Trump says from now on.
yes, he will
Yep.
give you your opinions. So with that, we're going to take a little break. This may be
Yep.
longer than we intended, but our timer doesn't exist anymore because we're on
Yeah.
Zoom.
Well,
So
I
we'll
mean,
be
what is time, Chris, really? When you
okay.
get right down to it.
And with that, we're going to take our break. And you'll hear a word from our sponsor. Who's our sponsor this week?
Oh, our sponsor this week is Jiminy Toast Crunchies.
Jiminy
Fantastic
Toast,
news. Yeah, fantastic new cereal made entirely of crickets.
made
Yeah,
entirely of crickets. It
Jeff
comes from
Bezos says eat them up. And so,
it's
yeah,
it comes from Southeast Asia. They're great with milk or
absolutely.
beer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So we'll see it in a second.
And we're back.
And we're back. Okay, so I hope you had a good scoop of that Jiminy Cricket cereal. Uh,
Absolutely.
the now with
Remember,
100% more crickets.
if you find the beetle, you win $5.
Ooh, five whole dollars, just like Elon
Five
Musk
American dollars.
promising $1 million
Absolutely.
to people turning up to a Supreme Court judge election in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and a hundred
Yeah.
bucks. Oh,
I mean,
phew.
it's not buying votes if you make it a lottery and you ignore the law.
And that's why he definitely
Mhm.
didn't. He definitely took down that tweet for different reasons, and not for the fact that it's a obvious proof of trying to buy votes, like it's 1877.
I mean, it
Anyways,
is, to be fair, the Trump administration's whole motto does appear to be make America an imperialist power of the 1800s again. So,
yes, definitely bring back the
yeah, bring back the
aristocracy.
spoils system. Exactly.
So, all right, we know
But
we've been
let's head
talking for a
across the
long
pond.
time. Let's go
Yep.
across the pond. We've been talking for a
Hmm.
long time, um, on things that because obviously things are always crazy in America, but
Hmm.
things are interesting over here as well. We've had this week the spring statement. So, what
Hmm.
the hell does that mean?
That's a really good question. And I think, Chris, you're best place to lead our audience through the thicket of parliamentary procedure to the sunny, grasslit uplands of knowledge.
Yeah, and as the general declaration of interest, as I said in some other podcasts or episodes earlier, I am an advisor, special advisor to the Scottish National Party Westminster Group. So I was actually in Parliament when these things were happening, and that's why I know about some of them. So basically, when in the United Kingdom, unlike the United States, there has to be a budget every year. Unlike the United States, if the House of Commons doesn't pass a finance bill, then they can't charge taxes for the outside the limit of that bill. And that bill only lasts for a year because you can't bind the
Wow.
parliaments together. So every year there's this thing called the budget, and every country has a budget. Just, for example, we were complaining about Chuck Schumer and the continuing
Right.
resolution
Hmm.
because America hasn't had a proper budget for how long?
I don't even know.
Like,
It has been, I think it has certainly been at least 20 years since you regularly had budgets being passed, although I might be wrong about that too, to be
yeah.
quite frank.
Well,
It
frankly, you
might
can
go
look it
back
up.
farther than that.
We're on our
Yeah,
computers today. You can look it up.
that's
But
true. All right, you spread the knowledge. I'm gonna look up
you
this
go
thing that I
there
do not yet know.
and do that. Okay, so in the budget process in the United Kingdom, there is first a speech in the House of Commons, and that speech details the different things the government's going to do economically and fiscally. So they announce any new tax changes, they announce any new policies. And this takes place in a speech called the budget. Now, the actual budget doesn't happen for several months when the content of the speech becomes a piece of legislation in the House of Commons and then eventually becomes the law in something called the Supply and Appropriations Bill, which becomes the Supply and Appropriations Act. So
Hmm.
that's the budget, right? And we had that budget in July of 20. Oh God, I forgot to look this up. But we had this budget either in the summer or the fall of July. I'm sorry, either the summer or the fall of 2024. I want to say July, but it was probably September. And I'll look it up real quick. And
Hmm.
once we had that fall budget, so yeah, that budget happened in October. Sorry, that was in October 2024. And so that means they have until October next year to get a new budget going. And in between that time, there's something called the either a statement or an update about what's happening in economically in the United Kingdom, usually addressing something called the OBR report, which the OBR is the Office of Budget Responsibility. It was set up during austerity to prove that we're not going to spend too much money in the country,
Hmm.
and they're operationally independent of the government. And it was set up by the Conservative Party, in my opinion, to create a trap for labor. But that's just my opinion. And in the interim, there is this statement, and the statement basically says, okay, here's how things are going. And sometimes you get policy statements, but you don't normally get taxation changes because that's more of a budget. Um, so what happened last week, I'm sorry, what
Hmm.
happened this week was that the government gave us the spring statement. The problem is that in between the budget in October 2024 and today, Donald Trump exists. And so the economic situation that the UK had thought was going to exist in the future has been completely thrown away because Donald Trump decided that he wanted to play loose and fast with the global economy. So, one more term that you need to know are fiscal rules, and they're basically self-imposed rules that say the government's not going to borrow X or not going to do Y outside of a certain thing. And this is important because the Labor government uh, basically said when they won, and before they won the election, they said, we're not going to change these rules that were set up by the Conservative Party. So the
Now
Labor
that's
Party,
interesting, Chris.
yeah,
I do want to ask a question about that. Why would they do that? Why would
this
you
is
agree to rules somebody else set?
Now, this is the big question of the day. People are trying to figure out why are you working towards the Tory targets, or why
Mm,
are you basically trying to be fiscally or financially like the Conservative Party? My personal belief, obviously my personal belief, it's not the view of the party or whatever, blah blah
of
blah blah
course.
blah,
Hmm.
is that they need to present themselves as the as politi as fiscally responsible, financially responsible, because for the past 16 years or 15
Mm,
years, they've been painted by the Conservative Party and the right-wing media in the United Kingdom as profligate and dangerous with money. And now they are kind of over-egging this to say, oh, we're not dangerous at all. We are super, super, like, we're super good with money.
hmm.
And that's
As
why the
evidenced by us following the policies put forward by the conservatives who destroyed the economy.
precisely.
Yep,
So
makes
now that you
perfect sense.
understand all these things, basically, here's some brief stats. economic growth, which they thought was going to be at 2%, is now down to 1%. And the big part
Mm,
of the spring statement is it's basically just a confirmation of policies that are already going to be enacted. And the big two policies is that because of Donald Trump's alignment with Russia and abandoning
hmm
of European security, the United Kingdom has to spend more money on defense. And the question is, how do you make spend more money on defense? And the United Kingdom has decided that they're going to basically cut funding to international aid to pay for more defense spending and
hmm
kind of in general to kind of balance the books because the books are not balanced. Let's just remember, our books are not balanced. They're
mm.
going to reduce the amount of money of the percentage of GDP that is spent on the welfare state. And so what that means is that the not that uh, money that is paid to people who are sick or who
hmm
can't work or and otherwise would need some sort of financial assistance. Maybe they have children or whatever. These people are going to start receiving less money overall from the
hmm
state. Um, and we're talking like, and some people they're if they're going to get money, that money will not increase significantly or at all until 2030. So that's
Mm,
5 years, and that's something called universal credit, the health element of universal credit. That's
hmm
frozen until 2030. So basically, if you're getting random number, £100, a
hmm
month for your help on health care, right? That
Yeah,
same £100 is not going to be worth what it is in 2030. It's going to be worth £90 or £85, right?
because of course inflation is a thing,
Yes.
and as we've all seen, if prices go up, your money goes a smaller distance.
It doesn't go as far as
Yeah.
you want.
Now, it seems that also this is quite controversial, the changes that they're talking about towards the Social Security regime. In particular, the cuts to personal independence payment, what is known as PIP.
Yeah.
These are payments not to people who cannot work, but those who are disabled and face extra costs as a result of their disability.
Yes.
And it's important to make that point because, A, there's a large number of people who are disabled who receive PIP who work, and it's the personal independence payments allowing them to pay for the extra cost of being disabled that can help them to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Removing PIP from them is not necessarily something that's going to lead to more people having employment. It is something that could actually have a negative impact there, depending on who it is that's being targeted. Um, and it's also worth mentioning that at least the government's own numbers here, when looking at what this is going to mean, involve a reduction in payments to enough people that some third parties looking at this are saying that this is going to push uh, tens of thousands of people into poverty. That the
Yeah.
results of this, if this is the only thing that happens, could really be absolutely catastrophic for a large number of people. Now, the government is arguing, to my understanding, that the numbers that they put out are literally just about what happens to the benefits, just that, nothing else. And their argument is that by doing this, they will also be putting money into helping people to gain employment so that they're making more money than they would be getting from benefits in the first place. And thus, they will be better off. And if that's true, hooray! That's great.
But, but
I have some questions with the plan.
yeah, but
Can I,
that's
can I, yeah,
that was the Tory argument. The Tory argument was that pe get people out of their sick beds and into the mines, and they will make more
right.
money in the mines than the sick bed.
Exactly. And everybody wins. Now, I've been technically in a coma for the last 13 years, Chris. So could you run past me real quick how well that worked?
Okay, real quick.
Mm-hmm.
After the financial markets crash in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
um, the basically the conservative government in 2010 when they won election in coalition with the liberal Democrats,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
imposed what was called austerity, which was basically swinging cuts across the entirety of the welfare state, actually across the entire state, and basically
Mm-hmm.
started cutting everything that they could to save money where they could.
How
Um,
did the NHS fare under that, out of curiosity? How well did
it-
that work out?
hobbled. The NHS was
Oh,
hobbled. I
oh,
mean,
that sounds bad. That
yeah,
you don't want the NHS to be hobbled.
the
They're the
NHS
ones who
was
help people who are hobbled.
yes, the
So,
NHS was hobbled.
oh,
The welfare system was hobbled. Education was
gosh.
hobbled. Because basically they tried to say if we take more money away, people will just
Mm,
get better. And then on top of that, then there was Brexit, which
mm,
means that the people who were working in the NHS on salaries that didn't increase for years because that was the deal,
mm.
they just left. And so
Oh, well, that seems like a problem.
yeah, and so basically a system was created that basically created massive gluts in the supply of people to do jobs, and
Mm,
it hasn't really been filled, and Brexit only made it worse. So now we're in the situation that we are dealing with today. We're talking about the spring statement, but also we're talking about the reason we're bringing this up is because the Labour Party in the United Kingdom is basically doing what the right wing wants to do, and that's balance the books and the backs of the poor.
mm,
There are no there are no I thoughts to basically borrow more money, which is a really bad word here, or
mm.
and for right now, there are no kind of suggestions to raise tax, although the government might have to raise tax in the fall when they have
The
another budget.
the IFS is saying that there is every possibility that Miss Reeves may actually have to raise taxes in the fall, precisely as you say, because, well, there's very, very little headroom in case anything goes wrong. And in the era of Trump, betting that nothing will go wrong, that doesn't seem to work too well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and
now,
there's go ahead, go ahead.
well, okay, so I just for the fun, the sheer bloody-mindedness of playing devil's advocate, if I understand the plan here correctly, the idea is to save money by spending less on Social Security, uh, use money to get people into work so that they're earning money, thus less reliant on Social Security, and also paying taxes on the money that they earn. And by doing this, you decrease government spending as a whole, which means borrowing less money, which means that interest rates on government borrowing go down, which means we're paying less on our interest to those who own British gilts and what have you, which opens up more fiscal room for the government to be able to spend money to stimulate the economy, which then leads to greater economic growth, which leads to more people being employed, which leads to fewer people relying on the welfare state, which leads to less money being spent, which leads to
Yeah,
etc. And then you get a virtuous cycle. And
sure.
I don't think that this is insane. I do think that it rests on some assumptions that I think are problematic, is how I'm going to put this. Um, so, number one, if the idea is to get people into work, because if they're working, then they will not be relying upon, they're going to be relying less on payments from the welfare state, right? Why is the plan to cut the payments from the welfare state and hope that they get a job rather than to spend the money up front to make sure people get a job so then you can save money on the welfare state? Why would you pull funding from people before they have the employment in the first place? When if they have the employment, that reduces the strain on the welfare state that you're looking to get done.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So yeah. So
that's a really good question, right?
yeah. Has the government put out a statement on that? Do we have a
I don't think the government's put out a
ah
statement on that
ah
very
crap?
complicated question that you've asked. But I
Ah
mean,
dear.
but that's the point. Like the problem with taking the conservative line on a lot of this stuff is that it is effectively punitive, right?
Yeah.
So like they go after, people on benefits. They never go after billionaires. They always make
It is
sure
funny how
that
that works.
yeah, that people who are sick or are unable to work for a period of time who basically
Hmm.
need that assistance, which most of us got during COVID, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, so all of us are a beneficiary of some kind of welfare state, even if you're in
Yep.
America and you got those checks from Biden or Trump or whatever during
Yeah.
COVID, that's a form of welfare. Um, like
And it should be pointed out, an incredibly effective form of it. The job losses that we saw during the shutdowns during the pandemic were more severe and more quick than anything we'd seen certainly since the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And the reason why they didn't persist as they did during the Great Depression was that so much money was being pumped into people's pocketbooks so they could keep spending money even though they couldn't work, that the rest of the economy could recover once the pandemic shock was over. Now, this did lead to a spike in prices afterwards. Some economists would argue that this is because all the extra money was chasing the same amount of goods. So that's why we saw some of the inflation. Other economists, I think, more correctly argue, well, actually, no, the shutdowns impacted supply. And if you
Yes.
got even the same amount of money chasing fewer goods, you're also going to get inflation.
Yeah.
Um, I would argue the fact that inflation has come down in most parts of the world as the supply shocks have worked their way through.
Yeah.
I think this is an indication it's much more the second story than the first.
Yeah.
Um, but so okay, so we have the issue of timing here on what we do first, and that I would like some answers on that. I'm going to be honest with you. But even
Okay.
aside from that, there's another assumption that I think that they're making, which seems really dangerous, and it's
Okay.
the idea that if you can have the government spend less money, then the government will have to borrow less money. And it may seem like that's an incredibly obvious thing. If I want to stop putting so much money on my credit card, I'm probably going to want to stop buying things that I don't necessarily need, right? If I
Hmm.
shrink my outgoings, but I keep my income the same, well, then I'll be borrowing less or I'll be saving more, depending on what my finances are, right?
Yeah.
There's a problem with this when you try to apply it to countries, though,
Of course.
because countries aren't individuals, they're not businesses, they're entire economic systems. Everyone who spends money in our economy is giving money to someone else in our economy that then they can spend.
Yeah.
So if the government spends less money, that's less money going into the rest of the economy for other people to then spend. Everyone's spending is somebody else's income. And if people in the larger economy have their income go down, well, then their spending has to go down, which means that the people they would normally buy from, those businesses, their income goes down,
Right.
which means that they're going to have to stop spending so much money, which means they have to fire people, which means those people have less money to spend. And you can see how this could, in the wrong
Yeah.
circumstances, absolutely work quite badly. In fact, this is kind of the explanation for why you would see the kinds of problems that we saw in 2008 with the financial crisis and during the Great Depression. Um, and I think the biggest reason to suspect that cutting government spending isn't going to be enough to reduce government borrowing is that the Tories spent 13 years in power cutting government spending, engaging in brutal austerity,
Yeah.
and borrowing didn't really drop, did it?
No, it didn't.
Like,
No,
yeah,
the
and
borrowing
yeah,
didn't drop, and that's why that's why a lot of people were arguing that they're ideological
yeah,
changes as opposed to economic necessities, because
indeed.
yeah, I think UK borrowing is always in like the high 90s or something.
Yeah.
It was some ridiculous number that's very, very high that, given that they are the Conservative Party, given that they're the party of, fiscal responsibility as they are portrayed, it just never seemed to come to fruition. And of course, they had to
Hmm.
borrow a lot to deal with COVID. And this is my take on borrowing is that, borrowing is such a bad word, but a
Hmm.
country borrowing to build a hospital or borrowing to build a row of airplanes or fighter
Yeah.
jets is
Or
to
build infrastructure, or dare I say, a high-speed rail network? I don't know.
or
Things
high
of that
speed.
nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You borrowing money to build things that people are going to use contributes to that positive recursive loop that Patrick was talking about. That, if
Mm.
we build a high-speed rail network, maybe fewer people will want to live in London if they know that they can get back to London quickly, or maybe they want to live in Birmingham, or maybe
Hmm.
they want to live, somewhere on the network and spread some of the wealth that is generated and held in London across the rest
Hmm.
of the country. And
Exactly.
but the alternate like problem with borrowing is like again Liz Truss, right? So Liz Truss wanted to borrow
Hmm.
40 billion pounds in order to give tax cuts to the richest people in society, and the market said, "Well, that's bonkers. We're not going to let you do
Yeah.
that," and it
That's
almost
literally
tanked the
insane.
economy.
Borrow money so that the government makes less money with which to repay the borrowing.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. It's like if I borrow money to get a car and that car lets me get a higher paying job, I win
Yes.
because I am making more money. I'm using that money to pay off my loan. Sure, I'm paying the interest on that loan, but I couldn't have gotten this higher paying job without that car. And now I've got that job and I'm going to keep getting the benefits of that going forward, right?
Yeah.
If I borrow a bunch of money in order to quit working,
Yeah,
then it's going to be the rare banker who looks at that and says, "Ah, yes, this is clearly a good investment that will pay off in the long run."
that will pay off
Um,
indefinitely. Yes.
yeah.
So,
So,
so go
what is
ahead.
it that happened to borrowing costs out of curiosity when Lit Trust did that? How did that work out?
Oh, they went. I can't remember exactly. All I remember is that I think they went to the roof. I think that
Yeah, I
borrowing
think the roof
costs,
is the destination
the
for.
borrowing costs. I don't remember exactly what like how much it cost, but basically it tanked the economy. Interest rates shot through the roof.
Yeah.
The people's mortgages were completely screwed.
Yeah, in
Uh,
my particular case, I don't mind sharing with the internet as a whole. My mortgage payment went up by 50%
five
thanks
zero.
to Miss Liz Truss. Yes, that's a five with a zero afterwards. Percent. And I did not care for it, Chris.
And so
I
that's
was not pleased.
yeah, that's not good. And so that's why
No.
you have to be careful with borrowing. But also bringing us back to the middle of the conversation is that
Hmm.
surely, like right now, the plan of the government is to be fiscally responsible by,
Hmm.
cutting from the on the backs of the people who need it the most. But they could easily borrow the money to try to b build more planes or whatever you need to do, or, sorry, fighter
Hmm.
jets or whatever you need to do to build up the UK's defense arsenal. The problem
Hmm.
is that because borrowing is a bad word in the UK, it's going to be hard to see that in the headline. Government borrowing increases to record highs to build more, Eurofighters or whatever they need to
Right.
buy in order
Yeah, to
to
rebuild the tank fleet, to, have a few more ships on the water.
and under it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You
so
probably want a few of those too.
Yeah, so as I said before, this is not a budget. This was just
Hmm.
effectively a note as to how things are going. And I've seen one commentator say that basically everything she said was complete fiction. That's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who was Rachel Reeves,
Hmm.
who was handed an already hard job, but frankly, Donald Trump is making it much harder because the she thought that she had some space to play
Yep.
with, right? And they call that fiscal headroom because the
Yep.
UK is in massive deficit right now, like a lot of other countries, and they're trying to
Hmm.
reduce the deficit and get back into surplus.
Hmm.
And every time Trump says there's going to be a tariff, that that space goes away. Every
Yep.
time Trump says he wants to start a war, that space goes away. And apparently,
Because borrowing costs increase and now more money has to be spent on interest, like my
exactly,
mortgage.
exactly. And,
Yeah.
and and the problem is that now Trump is effectively saying that apparently I've heard this on the news that the UK is negotiating with the United States of America, and
Hmm.
and America is demanding that the UK get rid of some of its taxes that they tax American companies with. And That is that is
uh,
unheard of to basically go to another country and say, get rid of your taxes or else we're going to tariff the hell out of you. I mean,
yep.
that's the equivalent of what, Britain did to, China and Hong Kong is like we're going to Hong Kong's like we're
Yep.
going to get rid of opium and they parked the gunboats off the coast and said,
Yep.
"No, you're not."
Yeah. Yeah. It's the kind of thing done by an overweening empire to what it believes to be its inferiors.
Yeah.
It is it's mafiosi diplomacy, not too far removed from what the Trump administration is not coincidentally doing with Ukraine. It's recently come out that they're now demanding that Ukraine give the United States effective control over all of their mineral resources.
Yeah.
Uh, Everything, every last bit of it, where the United States could extract all of the money it wants from Ukraine. It would have three out of the five seats on a commission to control infrastructure and mining and all the rest of it in Ukraine. It would get paid before Ukraine does. So if there wasn't enough money to go around, Ukraine starves to death and America takes its money. It's the kind of thing that you would see in,
The
the
Sopranos.
Soviet Union. Well, yeah, or the Soviet Union with like the Kazakh Soviet Republic. You know,
Well, I don't
it's
think we all know that, but I see what you're saying. I see what you're
yeah,
saying. Is that to make that offer, it's not an offer, basically saying, give me everything and I'm going to leave you with nothing. And we're going to
right,
basically we're going to gut you.
yeah.
And
Your
and
money
we
or your life is not a negotiation.
and the fact that, America is openly saying these things, maybe they're saying them to distract from what's happening with the signal gate, right? But
God.
there are no, good or bad answers. There are no good answers here, right? There are
Yeah,
only bad answers.
there are quite a
Um,
few of them. Quite a few of them.
yeah, yeah.
But you're right. So I don't envy Miss Reeves in her brief at the moment. She came in believing that she was going to have a very straightforward road of cutting spending, reestablishing Britain's place in international debt circles, bringing down interest rates, and then Trump came along and was like, "Nope, we're going to destroy everything for Britain because why not?" So
Yeah.
that's a fun and hopeful note to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's try and be a little bit not as bleak. I'm racking my mind for something that isn't horrible right now.
Well, actually, I do have something that may tie this together and provide at least a modicum of hope.
Oh, I've got one as well.
Oh, nice. All right. Do you want to go first?
Yes, I'll go first.
All right.
One, Kirsty Nome, who, no, no, no. Am I getting these names wrong again?
You're starting
Basically,
off on a very poor foot here, man.
I am. Sorry. Sorry,
Hmm.
Stefanik.
Ah, Elise Stefanik.
Elise Stefanik.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
sorry. There's so many different ridiculous people floating around. Elise
Yep.
Stefanik was the Trump pick to be the UN ambassador.
Hmm.
She hasn't become it yet, and she hasn't given up her seat, apparently. No, no, no. She must have given up her.
No, no, she
No,
hasn't given up her seat.
she
She
hasn't given up
did
her
give up
seat.
her committee assignments, though.
Yes.
Hmm.
But she hasn't given up her seat, and she's not going to give up her seat because they've withdrawn her name because clearly they know they're going to lose that race.
Now that's impressive to me because Elise Stefanik, if I remember, she comes from New York, right?
That's correct.
Uh, but not the liberal part of New York, upstate New York. She comes from a very Republican part of the state.
Yeah,
And she won her last election, which again was this recent election, quite handily, if I remember correctly.
she won it with yeah.
Yeah.
So go
So,
ahead.
how much of an upset would it take for her to like lose her majority, for the Republicans to lose that seat, basically?
What's it, 20% swing? What's it, 30%?
That is 21 points that Trump carried her
Detained.
district by. Yeah,
21.
21 points. Trump won her district by 21 points. And now they're so worried about losing it in a special election that they suspect a 21 point swing potentially. You're right. That offers a little bit of hope. That's nice. It's
Yeah,
balm for the soul.
yeah. So obviously either there's two options here. Either Trump
Hmm.
and his folk change tack and become more not crazy,
Hmm.
or they do what they've done with the signal chat and just steer heavy into the crazy, even
Oh
heavier
yeah.
into the crazy, because that's the only thing they know how to do. What's your moment of zen, if you will?
Well, this is basically it's. I'm going to direct everyone's attention to a YouTube channel that is called Money and Macro. It is hosted by an economist named Dr. Yuri Schasfort. He is Dutch, but his English is fantastic, and he's got an
Of
excellent
course it is.
way of presenting
He's
himself.
Dutch.
He's
Yeah.
he's good. He's the kind of YouTube that you watch and like, I feel smarter and I've learned something interesting. It's a good channel. Go check it out. He's often, sponsored by The Economist, which gives you some
Wow.
sense of where he places himself on the political spectrum. Um, Sort
Yeah.
of general center leftish, um, at least in the European context. Um, but I bring him up because he had a recent video that spoke specifically to the issue of how can we pay for this increased military spending that Europe absolutely has to be paying for now, it turns out, without gutting social services, without destroying the lives of the most vulnerable in society.
Okay.
And his argument
Controversial.
is,
Yeah.
I know. And his argument is actually, yeah, we don't have to do this at all. The thing is, Europe has been running underneath its economic productive curve for quite some time. Unemployment has traditionally been much higher inside of Europe than it has been in the United States. The amount of investment that's been going on has been much lower than it has been in the United States. Europe has been operating under a set of economic conditions that have left it incapable of living up to its productive capacity. A lot of this, you'll be surprised to learn, has to do with the euro. It has to do with sort of how Germany saw its role in the larger European economy. In particular, Germany has had a horror of inflation ever since, the hyperinflation of the 1920s, which was not fun. So
No.
I could see why that would leave a little bit of a cultural memory.
Yeah.
Um, that said, they seem to have learned the lesson in entirely the wrong way. For the last 20 years, Germany has been underinvesting in infrastructure. It has been keeping wages much lower for its workers, industrial workers and what have you, than otherwise it would. And that has been a means of allowing it to maintain its lead in exports to the rest of Europe. And that's a problem because one of the ways in which you would expect a linked together economic system like the euro to work is that more developed, richer countries with a higher standard of living have higher pay. And that means that it becomes more economically productive and viable to move production towards less wealthy, less developed areas. You'd expect, in other words, production to be moving on average from the north to the south, towards Spain, towards Italy, towards other
Yeah,
countries in the
yeah,
southern part of the Eurozone. By doing that, these countries become more wealthy, their standard of living goes up. Eventually, you would expect things to more or less equalize, but with higher productive capacity, more money for workers in the north, more employment for people in the south. It's the kind of thing that, if managed correctly, would allow for a much higher level of economic activity.
okay.
But that hasn't happened. One of the reasons it hasn't happened is that doing so would mean real dislocation in the north. It would mean real changes to what it is that Germany would be providing, because if they're not the cheapest place to produce cars in Europe anymore, what happens to the people who work in the car industry, for example?
Yeah.
So here's where economic benefit might actually come from increased military spending. You got a bunch of car factories, but you can't afford to make cars them anymore because it's not productive. But you know what you can make in car factories?
What's that?
Tanks, APCs,
Ah,
military equipment. All of a sudden, it becomes way more possible for military spending to employ people who would otherwise be doing something economically less productive, allowing a lot of that to shift towards areas of Europe where costs are simply lower. So all of a sudden, what we're talking about is greater economic growth, more people being employed, making money, spending money, allowing for an increased amount of investment into infrastructure and allowing increased investment into research and development. In other words, we might be in a position to gain some real economic benefits precisely from increasing military spending. And if we can increase our spending while also increasing the growth rates of our economy, then that spending, like my theoretical car in the example, Chris,
yes.
could end up paying for itself.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah, it's not a given. It's something that needs careful managing and good thinking from the people in charge. So obviously we're all screwed, but it's a nice thing to think about.
But there's something out there that is not, doom and gloom, and also an alternative
Exactly.
to balancing the books in the backs of the poor.
Well, there you go. There you go. So yeah, maybe there's a way to do this that doesn't make the world even worse than it's already becoming. And
And
that's a nice thought.
and hopefully we'll be around to find out. But I think that's going to be enough for today.
Yep.
We don't have our timer with us, so we're pretty
No,
sure this has gone very long, and we may
exactly.
have to cut down some of this. We'll see, but most likely not,
Well,
because
I
we're in
mean,
the
to be
early
fair,
days.
Chris, every word that drops from our lips is as of manna from heaven. So, I think we don't need to cut anything. We're tight. We're
Fantastic.
tight.
Oh, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Everything we say is around, and we'd never go around in circles. Um, but yeah,
Well,
so that's good for us. And
yeah.
as always,
I'm
I'm
Dr.
Dr.
Ramshaw.
Silverstein. No, let's try that again. Let's try that again. And I'm
We'll
not
do it
going to
again.
edit
We'll
that
do it
out.
again.
Do it
All
again.
right. Good.
As always, I'm Dr. Silverstein,
I'm Dr. Ramshaw,
and we're doctors.
not doctors.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.